Good morning. I'm Hampden District Attorney Anthony Gallooni. I'm joined today by Massachusetts State Police Detective Thomas Sullivan, Assistant District Attorney Beth Dunphy-Ferris, and members of Holly Piirainen's family to my right. I thank you all for being here. I recently stated in a public update on an unrelated, unresolved homicide case, as District Attorney along with my team, we never forget victims of homicide. And more important, we work on these cases until justice is served. It is our mission to deliver justice for these victims and their families. For all of us involved, it is a solemn and deeply meaningful obligation. In this endeavor, we work as many hours as we can devote. We spare no expense. We deploy only the best investigators and resources, and we employ the latest technologies. However, in many instances, we cannot do it alone. We need the public's assistance. We need someone who knows something to stand up with us and do what is right. Accordingly, we are here this morning to ask members of the media and the public at large for assistance in the homicide investigation of Holly Piirainen.
What if your child went out to play? Just a short walk down a quiet dirt road, in a sleepy little town where everyone knows your name. What if that innocent trip, to see a neighbor's new puppies, turned into the last time you ever saw their face? This is the story of Holly Piirainen, a vibrant 10-year-old girl, full of joy, spending summer days at her grandparents' cottage by the lake. She should have been safe. She should have grown up. But on one August morning in 1993, Holly disappeared. Without a sound. Without a struggle. Without a trace. Her case has haunted the state of Massachusetts for more than 3 decades. It remains one of the most chilling and heartbreaking unsolved child murders in New England history. A trail gone cold. Suspects without answers. A family torn apart. And one question that still echoes through the pine forests and quiet backroads of Grafton County. Who took Holly? And why? It was August 5th, 1993. A Thursday. A warm, golden summer day in the quiet town of Sturbridge, Massachusetts. The kind of day where the sunlight dances on the lake, the birds chirp lazily from the trees, and time seems to move a little slower. Holly Piirainen was 10 years old. Bright-eyed, curious, always smiling. She had just celebrated her birthday in January. Double digits, finally. She loved animals, especially dogs. She was gentle, polite, and full of energy, with the whole world ahead of her. That week, Holly and her family were staying at their lakefront cottage, a cozy retreat owned by her grandparents. It was meant to be a getaway. A place of peace and togetherness. Her younger brother, Zach, was just 5 years old, full of that toddler wonder, and always at Holly's side. They were close. Protective of each other. That morning, the two siblings set out on a short walk down South Shore Road, a narrow lane lined with tall trees and scattered summer homes. They were going to visit a neighbor's home just a short distance away. Word had spread there was a new litter of puppies, and Holly was eager to see them. It was an innocent moment. A harmless walk. The kind of errand children in small towns do every day, without a second thought. But only Zach returned. When he came back alone, Holly's father, who had last seen them at 11:45 a.m., felt a chill in his chest. It was too soon for fear, but something didn't sit right. And as the minutes turned into an hour, and then 2, panic began to set in. Calls were made. Search parties were formed. By late afternoon, Sturbridge Police, Massachusetts State Police, and even law enforcement from neighboring Connecticut and Rhode Island were involved. Neighbors, friends, total strangers, all came together, combing the woods, the roads, the ditches, the shorelines. Helicopters flew overhead. Dogs were brought in. Doors were knocked on. Nothing. And then, a chilling clue. One of Holly's white sneakers was found near a roadside. Just one shoe. Lying by itself in the dirt. No blood. No signs of a struggle. Just that lone sneaker, like a grim breadcrumb marking a child's final steps. It was the first undeniable sign that this was not a case of a little girl getting lost in the woods. Something terrible had happened. Someone had taken Holly. And as the sun dipped behind the horizon that evening, the mood in Sturbridge shifted from worry to dread. This was no longer just a missing child alert. This was the beginning of every parent's worst nightmare. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. And still, no sign of Holly Piirainen. The town of Sturbridge held its breath. Flyers with Holly's face, smiling brightly, were posted on every pole, in every shop window, across Massachusetts. The search didn't stop. Volunteers showed up every morning, clinging to hope. Police kept combing the woods. Her family held on, clung to the chance, no matter how slim, that she might still be out there. Alive. But hope can be a fragile thing. On October 23, 1993, 79 days after Holly disappeared, that hope shattered. Two hunters, walking through the dense woods of Brimfield, a rural town just a few miles from where Holly had vanished, made a horrifying discovery. In a secluded, wooded area, far from any homes or trails, they stumbled upon human remains. It didn't take long to confirm what everyone feared. It was Holly. Her body had been exposed to the elements for over 2 months. The forest had taken its toll. Decomposition had advanced so far that the coroner couldn't determine how she had died, or whether she had been sexually assaulted. There were no clear signs of trauma, no bullet wounds, no definitive evidence pointing to what exactly had happened to her in those final moments. But one thing was certain. Holly Piirainen had been murdered. She was just 10 years old. The discovery rocked the small community. Candlelight vigils turned into memorials. The stuffed animals, drawings, and messages once left in hope, now became offerings of grief. For her parents, Christina and Rick, the unimaginable had become reality. They had lost their daughter. And worse still, there were no answers. No suspect. No explanation. No justice. Only questions. And silence. The murder of Holly Piirainen didn't just devastate one family. It sent a tremor through Grafton, through Sturbridge, through every quiet town in southern Massachusetts. A place where families left their doors unlocked. Where kids rode their bikes until dusk. Where danger felt like something that only happened somewhere else. Now, that illusion was gone. Parents clutched their children tighter. Backyards felt less safe. And a generation of kids, once carefree, learned fear far too early. But this tragedy didn't just bring fear, it brought confusion. How could this happen here? How could someone abduct a child in broad daylight, and vanish without a trace? The details of Holly's disappearance were almost surreal. Her family was visiting their lakefront cottage, a quiet retreat they'd owned for years. Their stay wasn't advertised. It wasn't planned months in advance. It was supposed to be a simple, spontaneous escape from everyday life. Hardly anyone even knew they were there. And yet, someone had been watching. Someone knew when Holly would be alone. Someone waited, and acted. Was this an unthinkable stroke of chance? A predator crossing paths with a child at the worst possible moment? Or was it something more targeted? Someone familiar with the area, maybe even familiar with the family? The questions grew louder, echoing in every conversation, every newspaper headline, every town hall meeting. The entire region was on edge, not just because of what had happened to Holly, but because whoever had done it was still out there. Unseen, unknown, unpunished. And that fear, that lack of answers, would haunt the community for decades to come. 7 years had passed. But the memory of Holly Piirainen still lingered like a shadow over Massachusetts. And then, another disappearance. Another young girl, gone. Her name was Bish. She was 16, a bright, athletic high school student who worked as a lifeguard at Coleman's Pond in the small town of Warren, just 15 miles from where Holly's remains had been found. It was June 27, 2000. A clear summer morning. Molly's mother had dropped her off at the pond just after 10 a.m. She was wearing her lifeguard uniform. carrying her first aid kit. Everything looked normal. But by noon, swimmers were arriving. And Molly was gone. No one had seen her leave. There was no struggle. No witnesses. She had simply vanished, just like Holly. For days, weeks, and then years, the search went on. Billboards, news reports, community vigils. And then came the twist. A detail that seemed too eerie to be coincidence. In 1993, the same year Holly disappeared, 10-year-old Molly had written a letter to Holly's grieving family. She had been touched by the story, moved by the loss of a little girl so close to her own age. She wrote, "I am very sorry. I wish I could make it up to you. Holly is a very pretty girl. I wish I knew Holly. I hope they found her." A heartfelt note from one child to another, strangers, but connected by tragedy. 3 years after Molly's disappearance, in 2003, her remains were discovered in a remote wooded area. Just like Holly. Also unsolved. 2 girls. 2 wooded recovery sites. 2 families torn apart by grief. And one silent, terrifying question. Could the same person be responsible for both? In 2012, nearly 19 years after Holly Piirainen vanished, a new name emerged from the shadows. David Pouliot. He wasn't a household name. He wasn't a known criminal. He was just a local man. A Springfield resident who spent much of his time outdoors. He was known to hunt and fish in the very woods where Holly's remains had been found. And then came the revelation. Forensic evidence, recovered near Holly's body, had been linked to Pouliot. The details were murky. Authorities wouldn't say what the evidence was. Was it DNA? A hair? An item he dropped? They kept it quiet. Still, for the first time in years, there was a glimmer of something solid. A possible connection. But there was one major problem. David Pouliot had died in 2003, nearly a decade before his name ever surfaced publicly. That meant no interrogation. No trial. No chance to hear his story. Investigators labeled him a person of interest, not a suspect. They said the evidence suggested he had been in the area where Holly was found, but stopped short of calling him her killer. And just like that, the trail, once again, went quiet. The woods of Brimfield held their secrets. And Holly's family was left with more questions than answers. Years passed, and the case seemed to sink into the background. But then, another disturbing clue emerged, a clue that would raise more questions than it answered. A group of retired investigators, passionate about Holly's case, took it upon themselves to re-examine the evidence. They launched a website dedicated to the search for the truth, hoping to uncover what had been missed in the decades-long investigation. What they discovered was chilling. Witnesses recalled seeing a man in a brown pickup truck in the area on the day Holly disappeared. The truck was spotted several times, creeping slowly past a mailbox where 2 teenage girls had been standing. The girls later described feeling uneasy, fearing the man would leap from the truck and grab one of them. They retreated, only to see the truck return moments later, this time, with the driver turning around at the end of a road where Holly had been. Was this man the same one who took Holly? As the investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a man who lived nearby and owned a truck that matched the description. He wasn't a stranger, he was part of the community. But his connection to the case was far from ordinary. In a twist that could have been straight out of a crime thriller, this man had been pulled over by police hours after Holly vanished. His license was suspended. But in an unbelievable turn, officers, believing his paperwork to be current, let him go. It didn't end there. The man's ex-wife spoke to reporters years later, revealing that he had a history of disturbing behavior. She claimed he suffered from a sex addiction, exhibiting compulsive tendencies that made her fear for the safety of others. And then came a revelation that sent shivers down investigators' spines. The man allegedly knew a private detail about Holly's clothing, something that had never been made public. A detail that only the abductor would have known. Yet, despite all of this, despite the eerie coincidences and the chilling revelations, there were no charges. No arrest. Just more questions, and an ever-growing sense of dread. Who was the man in the brown pickup truck? Could he be the key to unlocking Holly's case? And if so, why has he never been held accountable? In 2020, the investigation took yet another strange and unsettling turn. Authorities made a decision that seemed almost too bizarre to believe. A man's body, not David Pouliot's, was exhumed from a cemetery in Hampden County. Why would they disturb a grave after so many years? The answer was as unsettling as it was mysterious. Investigators had received an anonymous tip, a lead that seemed to promise a breakthrough. The tipster claimed that a letter, placed in the man's coffin, might contain vital clues about Holly's murder. Who wrote the letter? What was inside? And why did it end up with this particular man? Hoping the letter would reveal something that could connect the dots, authorities carefully unearthed the body, desperate for any shred of new information. But the answer they found was one of pure frustration. The letter, having been buried underground for over 2 decades, had been severely damaged by water. The paper was barely legible, disintegrating in their hands. Nothing substantial could be made out. No new information. No fresh lead. It was, in every sense, another dead end. A false hope, buried with a man whose connection to the case remained as cryptic as ever. The haunting question lingered. Could the letter have held the answer to who killed Holly Piirainen? And if so, why was it lost to the ravages of time? In March 2025, Holly's mother, Christina Harrington, passed away after a long illness. She spent decades fighting for justice, but she died without answers. Today, Holly's family continues to hold on to hope. Hope that new DNA technologies, or perhaps a guilty conscience, might one day bring the truth to light. A scholarship fund now bears her name, and a place in the Garden of Peace in Boston honors her memory. But a question still lingers. Who took Holly Piirainen? And why? If you know something, anything, speak up. Sometimes, even the smallest detail can crack a case wide open. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, share it. And if you believe in justice for Holly, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and tell us your thoughts in the comments below. We won't forget Holly. And neither should you.